Cool. Yeah, take it away, Akash.
Yeah, so today we'll be talking about this paper called How Close is ChatGPT to Human Experts? Comparison, Corpus, Evaluation, and Detection. So basically, with the advent of ChatGPT, there's one very burning question that we want to know is how different it is from human experts, because we have seen the capabilities of ChatGPT, and it can create pretty good generative answers for almost a huge variety of questions that anyone can think of. So then a very natural question is like, how is it still different? Like, how can we detect whether if a question is generated from ChatGPT or how good it is? Uh, so this paper largely focuses on that. um, so this is the paper metadata. This is the paper's link. I will share this. I think I will share it right now in the group also. Yeah. So first, an overview of the paper. So ChatGPT recently has had a huge public adoption, and its ability to respond effectively to a wide range of questions is unparalleled. So as I was said earlier, I said earlier that this, however, creates concerns of what impact it could have on society. So it forces us to think how far it is from human experts. So the authors have come up with a dataset called HC3, which is Human Chat GPT Comparison Corpus, to compare responses from humans and ChatGPT in questions ranging from open domain, financial, medical, legal, and psychological areas. And further, they also conduct experiments to detect whether a certain text is generated by a human or ChatGPT. So, just a little bit of background. So, LLMs like GPT-3, which usually fail to properly respond to human queries, instruct. So yeah, with the advent of ChatGPT 3, one very important problem it had was it was not really very well at following human instructions. So later on, OpenAI came up with Instruct GPT, and ChatGPT is kind of a successor for that, and it is really good in interactions with human because it's generated with a like a chatbot application kind of mindset that it should be really good at interacting with humans. So, from the linguistic or NLP perspectives, the authors are also interested in where are the remaining gaps between ChatGPT and humans, and what are their implicit linguistic difference. Like where are the areas where ChatGPT is still different from humans, and what are some linguistic properties that we can observe and just see that okay, this might be a ChatGPT generated answer. So yeah, and people are also worried about the potential risk that are brought by LLMs like ChatGPT. So, for example, Stack Overflow has already banned ChatGPT generated content because it believes that the average rate of getting the correct answer is low through ChatGPT. And many other applications and activities are facing similar issues, such as online exams. People are now writing their essays using ChatGPT, and it is being used as a de facto tool for content writing. And like, what will be the, like, how do you identify that what content is generated via ChatGPT and which is not? So there are three major contributions by the authors. The first one is that they introduced the HC3 dataset, in which they try to analyze the linguistic and stylistic characteristics of both humans and ChatGPT. And they also conduct comprehensive human evaluations as well as linguistic analysis on the human and ChatGPT generated answers. And they also develop some chat GPT answer detecting models, which we'll be discussing later. So to start with, first we'll have to discuss what this HC3 corpus is. So the main criteria behind HC3 corpus is that the authors want to evaluate whether ChatGPT, can give honest answers, like not fabricate information or mislead the user in some way, and whether it is harmless, because it should not generate harmful or offensive content. And finally, how helpful it is. Like, for sure, it can generate any answer, but is it any use to anyone at all? And how helpful it is when it is compared to the answers generated for the same questions through human experts. So, hello. Yeah. So basically, their whole idea was that inviting human experts to manually write question and answer is tedious and unaffordable. So what they did was basically find places on the internet, find the sites on which you can find a question and a corresponding answer from a human expert. So they got the human expert answers from publicly available question answering datasets, and through Wikitext, where they can ask a question around a particular concept and they can get the corresponding answer also. So these are the details of the HC3 corpus. So they created two versions of this. One is in English and one is in Chinese. So you can see here on the extreme left, like the original dataset sources like Reddit ELI5, which is like explain to me like I'm five. So people asked questions there, and a lot of people then answer those questions, and they try to explain it in as simple terms as possible. And yeah, so these are the statistics and the number of questions that are there. So there are almost 24,000 questions in the English corpus and 12,900 questions in the Chinese corpus. And yeah, uh, so let's get to the part where they conduct their human evaluation. So their evaluation consists of two tests. One is like the basic Turing test, where the person has to differentiate between a human answer and a chat GPT generated answer. And the other kind of test is the helpfulness, where how helpful are the answers from chat GPT. And the Turing test again have three subcategories, where basically it's an expert Turing test, paired text. I'll explain what that is. So basically, here an expert is anyone who has come across, how ChatGPT functions, and the person has seen the kind of responses it generates. So an expert is shown a pair of text, and she has to determine which one is generated by ChatGPT. Another version of the same. So here, the expert is given a pair of text. So he or she will receive an answer that is generated by human and an answer that is generated by ChatGPT, and they have to select which one is generated by ChatGPT. Another flavor of the same experiment is that an expert is given only single text. So basically, a question is given and its answer is given, and using that answer, the person has to predict is it a human generated answer or by ChatGPT. And the third flavor is amateur Turing test. So amateur here is a person who has never seen how ChatGPT works, or never seen the kind of responses it generates, and they are usually passed a single text, and they basically select whether this answer is generated by a human or through ChatGPT. So here are the results of the human evaluation. Few I Okay, I'll come back to this table. Sorry. So yeah. So straight away you can see that whenever an expert is given, pair responses, that is an answer that is generated by a human and one that is generated by chat gpt, an expert is highly, is able to, I'm sorry, yeah, is able to identify it correctly. So for human evaluation, you can see in the third row, it's 0.90 for pair expert. And similar result you can see for Chinese also. So pair expert, they can easily identify a 0.93. So whenever there are, two examples given to you, of a human generated answer and a machine generated answer, you can easily identify which is which. Amateurs, on the other hand, very didn't really have very good luck. Like people who had no idea what kind of tech ChatGPT is, what kind of response it can give. They are almost at point 0.5, both of them. So not really a good sign. Like people who don't know about ChatGPT, they very easily assume that a human is creating this text. And one surprising indicator was the helpfulness here. So helpfulness is 0.57 and 0.54 for Chinese and for English and Chinese respectively. So basically this means is that almost 57% people, they found the responses from ChatGPT actually helpful. So which is kind of a interesting result. Uh, so yeah, as I said earlier, that it is one of the few results that we can think of, that it is easier to distinguish between ChatGPT generated content with a comparison pair, like when a human answer is also given in the parallel. And ChatGPT's answer are generally considered to be more helpful than humans in more than half of the questions, because it's more than 50%. And one interesting fact is that the helpfulness of the ChatGPT answer is really low in the medical domain. So if you see here the highlighted figures, for medical domain, ChatGPT is really bad. So the reason behind this that the author came up was that the ChatGPT often gives lengthy answers to medical consulting, and while the human experts may directly give the straightforward answer or suggestions which may partly explain why volunteers consider human answers to be more helpful. So basically, when it comes to medical domain, people just want precise and straightforward answer, whereas ChatGPT always tries to give a very long, lengthy version of an answer. So then they also did some summarization evaluations also, and they came up with these distinctive patterns of ChatGPT. And these are kind of the most important part of the entire presentation, because they kind of show like what kind of outputs ChatGPT usually gives. So the first thing is that ChatGPT writes in a very organized manner and with very clear logic. And one more thing is that ChatGPT loves to define the core concept in a question. It will most probably answer the core concept behind the question and then explain it with an example. And it's kind of trained it in such a way that it prefers explaining a concept and later explaining it with an example. So yeah, that's one thing. And ChatGPT tends to offer a very long and detailed answer. Like unless you give it a prompt of like give the answer in so and so words, or keep it very small, it will probably go for a longer and a detailed answer. And the third point is that ChatGPT shows very less bias and harmful information. Basically, it doesn't really has any bias or anything. I think they kept these thing in mind while training it during RLHF, that it should not show any bias, or it should not spread any harmful information. Uh, is defining a core concept in question inherited by some sort of instruction in tuning data? My understanding of that is that when they were creating dataset for RLHF, they must have given some sort of a format for the people participating in the study, to a format to give the answers. So in that format, it's usually like they will try to explain a concept first and then explain what might be the explain it with an example later. So that's what my understanding is. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It's more like a chain of thoughts, right? If we look at like very high level.
Okay. Yeah. Another important thing is that ChatGPT refuses to answer any question that it thinks it is out of its knowledge. So I think I don't remember the exact number. It is trained on data till 2021 or some dump from 2021. So information that might be related to some time later, it doesn't really answer about those things. And one very important thing is that ChatGPT might fabricate answers. So, for example, when the authors were testing it, when it came to legal questions, ChatGPT also invented some non-existent legal provisions to answer the question. So, the correctness of the information is still very doubtful because ChatGPT has the capability to fabricate facts. And coming to the part where what if we see it objectively, what are the major differences between human generated answer and chat GPT generated answer? The one very interesting observation by the authors was that the chat GPT's response are generally strictly focused on giving the exact question that is asked. So let's say if someone is asking about a war, and then like what happened during this war, and then chat gpt might literally try to explain what happened during that war. But if a human was to give an answer, they might try to explain the history behind it, what might have caused and what led to those things. So human answers are much more divergent and easily shift to other topics, whereas chat gpt will strictly focus on answering the particular question. Like it doesn't care of the context, like any other history that might be related to the war. It will just strictly give the answer. On the other side, ChatGPT is excellent at interpreting terminology and concepts. You can ask it any question. Even I tried some this question some time back, like explain accounting to a 5-year-old. It gave a very beautiful answer. So it is really good at interpreting terminology and concepts, where human answers are much more specific and include detailed citation from sources. So, like, let's say if you ask someone some concept on ask a concept on the Stack Overflow, some very high, difficult concept. Then those, if you notice, those answers will probably have some citation to some other paper if it is written by a human, that you can further read from here, or this is where I got my knowledge from. So yeah, so whenever there are questions related to terminology and concepts, human answers generally consider citation from other sources. And one obvious thing is that humans love to apply humor, irony, metaphors, and other examples of antiphrases. Like they try to make their answer much more human by including humor or other thing. Whereas Chat GPT never uses antiphrases. It is always straight to the point, and it's not trying to do any sarcasm or any other thing. And another thing is that ChatGPT expresses less emotion in its response, while human chooses many punctuation and grammar features in context to convey their feelings. Like humans, whenever they're trying to answer a question, there is some sort of an emotion involved while explaining, giving that answer. ChatGPT almost exclusively shows neutral sentiments in all of its responses. Yeah, so coming to the linguistic analysis of what the author found. So, an interesting thing was that compared to ChatGPT, human answers are relatively shorter, but a larger vocabulary is used. So, one important thing that they realized was that ChatGPT never really uses, unique words, or it never really uses a very large vocabulary. Like it can probably use a much larger vocabulary, but in its answer, uh, the number of unique words that are there in its answer will remain relatively less. Whereas human answers, though short, they'll use a better vocabulary, but their answers will be shorter in that way. And ChatGPT uses more noun, verb, uh, uh, yeah, all these parts of POS words, and while at the same time using less adjective and punctuation words. And a high proportion of nouns often indicate that the text is more argumentative, exhibiting informativeness and objectivity. Yeah. And another interesting thing is that ChatGPT usually uses more conjunctions than humans to make the content more logical. So yeah, ChatGPT basically uses more conjunctions in its answer. And as we discussed earlier, ChatGPT generally expresses more neutral sentiments than humans, and humans express significantly more negative emotions than ChatGPT, which is, I guess, is expected because people exhibit much more negative emotions. And another interesting thing is that ChatGPT has relatively lower perplexity scores compared to the text written by humans. So what this basically shows is that whatever the model, the kind of text that the model is trained on, right? It will try to recreate that kind of text again and again to answer a question rather than, rather than humans who will use a different word and try to explain the things in much more crispier and shorter way. So yeah, ChatGPT has relatively low perplexity scores for the answer that it generates. The second part of the paper is mostly around how to detect what thing is generated by ChatGPT, and they come up with three major detection methods. One is GLTR, and I didn't really get into the depth of it. They basically select a feature set, and they apply normal logistic regression on top of that. The other one is Roberta single, which basically means at a single time they pass one question and answer. Uh, no, sorry, they only pass a single sentence. So that sentence could be either human generated or chat GPT generated, and the Robota model has to identify whether it's which one it is, whether it's human or chat GPT generated. And the other one is Robota QA, which basically means that given a question and an answer, how does adding the question for the detection helps in any way to identify um, whether the answer is generated by a human or by ChatGPT. So the questions that the authors target here for content detection is like how will the indicating word influence the detector? So indicating word are basically words that tell something about, okay, this might be generated by chat gpt or humans. So like for example, indicating words for chat gpt will be ai assistant. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. So there are a few steps. Like if you use chat gpt and as soon as you read this, you know, okay, this is generated by chat gpt. Whereas indicating word for human will be no, my view is. So both ChatGPT and humans have their own distinctive way of answering questions. So what those words are that can show directly like which is in that these this word is definitely indicating that it is generated via ChatGPT. So how much do these indicating words influence these detectors? And is it more challenging for ChatGPT detectors to detect sentence level content? Because let's say if you're given a huge content, right, like 3 4 paragraphs of some text, and you know how ChatGPT works, so you can see, okay, this falls in some form of a format that ChatGPT follows. You can when you have used ChatGPT enough, you will start recognizing that. So but what happens at sentence level? Like you can identify easily, okay, these 3 4 paragraphs have come from ChatGPT. But what about sentence level content? Like, is there good enough detection possible for sentence level answers? Yeah. So the results are basically that the deep learning method of Roberta A based detector is better than GLTR, which was using logistic regression on top of features, certain features that were extracted. And one interesting thing is that Roberta-based detector is not really affected by indicating words. So these words didn't really play much more importance when Roberta was being used for detection. And another observation was that removing the indicating words helps the model trained on full text to perform better across different content granularities. It basically means like if you train the model on full text after removing the indicating words, it performs better even for the entire 3-4 paragraph and even for a single sentence. And detectors that were trained on hard sample, that is the entire sentence corpus, are much more easier to solve simple tasks like detecting the full corpus, while simple samples, that is the full corpus, may be less useful for solving more difficult tasks, which is sentence corpus, because identifying whether a single sentence is chat GPT generated or human generated is kind of tough. So yeah. And another important observation was that the QA model is generally more effective than the single model. Basically, when you pass the question along with the answer, then the detectors work better in that scenario. And also that the QA training makes model much more robust to sentence inputs. So if you are trained with a QA pair, it ends up giving better sentence detectors also later. I think my presentation didn't get saved entirely. I'll just go over here. No, I think this is it. This must be some earlier site that came here. We should be here, yeah. Yeah, sorry for the confusion. So basically, here are the details of the dataset split that they created for the evaluation results, and so they basically they created two versions of their dataset. One was the raw version where all the inputs are as original, and the filtered one where indicating words we are removed from the raw data. Indicating words are the example of these AI assistant and know these kind of words. And each split is then further divided into three categories, which is full, which basically means containing the entire answer as an input for any particular question, and sentence is containing only a single sentence of the answer, and a mix, which is basically the combination of two above. And uh, so they do different experiments on these splits of the data set, and they come up with the results that we just discussed in this slide. So yeah, any questions? Hello.
No questions. Very straightforward.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, that's it for today's paper discussion. Yeah.
I mean, you cover a lot of stuff here.
Sorry.
You quite cover a lot of stuff.
I think
Yeah.
probably like the good follow up would be, I know OpenAI or like a lot of people I think have recently released like various detection models, right?
Have they? I didn't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
there's,
can
there's
detect it.
papers that like use I think there's, I don't know, there's a few approaches I've heard that kind of with very high accuracy are able to kind of detect human versus GPT written responses. So that might be a good one to follow up this with. Let me see if I can find that paper.
You know something funny? They'll fail one thing. If you add a comma, boom, it destroys the prediction.
So did OpenAI release the detector publicly? Because I don't know.
I think so. I remember seeing at least a paper on this.
No, there are
Because when
several, and there is also for image.
We can probably stop the recording.
Here.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.